Hi everyone, this is a briefing for the online mentors about the topic of problem solving and its assessments. I thought doing a video briefing might make it, might be a little bit more efficient than speaking to you individually or doing a session at a PTC or PLT meeting. So I'm just going to run through the problem solving topic and the assessments. I have sent out, I think, an email previously to give you a heads up with regards problem solving. But I just thought I'd go through a little bit more detail. So I'm just going to do it with this PowerPoint and talking over the PowerPoint. Again, if you have any questions, please come see me. Just at the very beginning, just note that the trainees with their assessment are asked to do what is called a client file. But be aware that it's not really a client file like some of the other topics. It's more like a client file task. So they do a letter of advice and a few other things. So don't be put off when you see on the problem solving page the trainees are doing client file. It is just a letter of advice and a few other bits and pieces. Now, just a bit of reassurance, although I'm going to go through a bit of information, just be aware that this topic has run in this way, in a very similar way in this course like it has in previous courses where the trainees do a letter of advice and have to do a second letter. And the feedback process has worked pretty smoothly in the past. The key difference is that the mentors will be assessing it rather than myself. So that's just the main difference. But in terms of the actual subject materials, even the problems are all the same as what's been done for the past few years. Apology, a bit of information overload with these slides, but I thought best to put it all there just in case you are interested. In terms of what you should have received, I've sent out today in hard copy, but I'll also send out email, soft copy, a range of things that might hopefully give you a bit of an idea of what's going on with the topic. You would have received the instructions, or fact scenario instructions, and a blank performance sheet for which the trainees get for the problem that you are doing, which I think you should be aware of. There's also an updated instructor guide to the problem that you're doing. That includes suggestions of what could go in the letter, some sample letters, a sample performance criteria sheet, and some sample feedback given to trainees in the past. And I think you'll find that useful. There is a trainee general feedback sheet. This is what the trainees get after they submit their first drafts. Now, I'll talk about the process with that later on, but that'll be made available to them online after the due date, but you can give it to them earlier. When they hand in their first letter and you provide feedback, you'll also be giving to the trainees a trainee reflection and review sheet. And I've got one of those and a sample there for you to look at. I've got some green assessment sheets, like the usual mentor green assessment sheets, and I've got some blank ones. I've given you some blank ones, hard copy, but I've got some sample completed ones online or electronically, so that you can adapt then if you wish to do your assessment sheets electronically. And I encourage you to do that. A lot easier to do it that way. And I've also got, in terms of when you give feedback to the trainees for the first draft and also the second draft, I've also got some suggested text to what goes in your email or Dropbox communications that you might want to use. It's what I've used in the past, and it might make life a little bit easier just to follow that. But that's in your hands. I'm just going to quickly go through how the topic runs, highlight changes for 2017, explain the assessments, and explain how you mark the assessments. In terms of how the topic runs, this is just to give you an overview, but firstly, they were given a brief overview lecture during the first intensive, and the assessments were explained to them. The trainees were then advised what the file problem they have, so they know, and the online activities were flagged with them. And the letter of advice they need to do is due on the 14th of March. And there's the breakdown for the different groups and who does what. There is also an online overview lecture with a lot more detail, and which is useful for them to watch, and they should be encouraged to watch it. That's on their online problem solving page, and there's a table of steps on the problem solving page as well. Just worthwhile knowing for the topic of problem solving, why we run the topic of problem solving is that in the competency standards, problem solving is one of only 4 skills that are identified as an area that we need to teach in, or have as part of our curriculum. And it's one of the reasons why we do, perhaps it's been elevated in the past couple of years in terms of workload, because it is classified as, you know, a discrete skill that needs to be taught separate to those other areas. Of course, problem solving flows through different parts of the course, but it's worthwhile knowing that it is one of the key skills. You can see it there listed under lawyer skills. Now, we teach problem solving in 3 subunits: legal research, statutory interpretation, and problem analysis, so 3 subparts. Now, each of those parts have topic support materials. There is an online video for each of those parts, and there is compulsory online topic work, activities, quizzes. They're also due the 14th of March. Now, the mentors don't look at those. The PTC registry will look at, or PLT registry, and they'll let you know when the trainees have completed those. The focus of the training that we do in those subunits is to refresh the trainees' training in this area and refocus at the practical legal context, because they've all had a bit of practice in this already. So we're just building on that experience. In addition to these 3 subunits, and each having their own discrete activity, there is this major umbrella assessment that needs to be completed. Now, it is called a client file, but it is the letter of advice that I flagged previously. That's due the 14th of March. The idea is that that letter of advice requires a trainee to do to demonstrate the skills in those 3 key areas of locating law legislation, legal research, interpret the legislation, statutory interpretation, generate options, problem analysis, and then 4th, communicate the advice in a client letter. So the idea is that one task, that one letter of advice, covers all of those 3 subunits of the thing. This is a bit of a diagram of the problem solving topic. You can see how it's got the 3 parts with the lecture and quiz in each part, and then it all comes together with the problem solving client file, letter of advice, and the performance criteria sheet. So it's combining the 3 units into one, and again, the letter is assessed by mentors. Just in terms of changes for 2017, most is the same as previous courses, same problems, same process. They need to do a second draft, they do a brainstorming sheet, a reflection sheet, all the same green assessment sheet. The main change is the client file letter of advice will be submitted and assessed by a trainee's mentor, and that it's the mentor that completes the green assessment sheet rather than myself. I'll talk about that a bit more later on. Why the change? Well, firstly, it just spreads the workload amongst the staff. It also reinforces a trainee's mentor as their main assessor, and also it provides an early opportunity in the course for a mentor to assess their trainee work, to reinforce learning in terms of style and how they'd like things done. But also it provides a way of assessing where the trainee is at nice and early in the course. Now, another small change is trainees no longer have a choice as to which problem they do. Previously, they could choose which of the 3 they could do, which they wanted to do. This time, we've just, a mentor's trainees will all have the same problem. I think it just makes it easier for everybody. Some other small changes with the preliminary exercises. These are all done online as quizzes, as in the past. It just makes it, all the preliminary exercises now are all online, as opposed to previously as a bit of a mix of different types of submissions. So all quizzes. With legal research, there are 6 online activities, short answer questions, reduced from 10, and they no longer have a choice. Statutory interpretation, they've got 5 online activities, short answer questions. This replaces the urgent repairs memo. And problem analysis, 3 online activities, short answers using the National Competency Standards loop, applying to a factual situation. This replaces the 5-level analysis. And the idea is to put these in quiz format so that all the answers are automatic, a lot easier to track and to mark. I'm just going to explain the assessments now. So trainees are completing 3 sets of topic work, online activities, as I flagged, for legal research, statutory interpretation, problem analysis. You don't look at these, they're due 14th of March. You'll be advised when they're done. There is a section on the green assessment sheet where you just have to tick that it's been completed, but you'll be advised of that. So they do preliminary exercises or topic work, and then they're asked to do their client file letter of advice. So letter of advice, 1,000 words, due 14th of March. And then they also have to hand in what's called a performance criteria sheet. You'll see that in the pack you've got. It's a brainstorming sheet. It's quite brief. Now, it's due 14th of March. Now, it's a brainstorming sheet in relation to the fact scenario that this letter of advice is on. What is this and why? A performance criteria sheet, if you actually read it, it actually, all the different elements that are raised in it matches across to the competencies. So the idea is by firstly encouraging trainees to do brainstorming and take, plan their letter writing before they do it. The idea from our point of view is it also is a clear ticking of the box in terms of them turning their mind to the elements of the competency. So it's a little bit easy for us to sign off with the competency. So the idea is performance criteria sheet, it actually it shows a performance of the competency criteria. And it's good for them to get through a brainstorming exercise. Now, there is no hard copy file. Initially, just the above two things are submitted via the dialog box, or however you like them to do it. Explain assessments. So it's like a normal file. So trainees will, we want you to give individual feedback to trainees on their letter, and then they'll also be given some general feedback, which I'll explain later, and then they're asked to do two further things. So firstly they do their first draft of the letter, then they do a performance criteria sheet. The third thing they need to do is a second, which is the final draft, a letter of advice. That's the 18th of April. And the final thing is what we do is a reflection and review sheet. It's brief, due the same date. What is this and why? Again, we've done it in the past. The idea is rather than just giving them feedback and then saying, change your letter, and they just submit what you've asked them to change, we want them to reflect and consider their strengths and weaknesses of their work, the feedback they've received, and to actually then produce a document in relation to it. So we want them to perhaps, rather than simply do what we tell them to do, to reflect on it a little bit. It's quite a short sheet for them to complete. In the past, the feedback on this sheet has been surprisingly positive. So it's just another little task for them to do. So mentors will receive 4 items of work during problem solving, although 2 of them, brainstorming sheet, reflection sheet, they don't need to be assessed, so long as they've made an effort. So it's the first draft, second draft, reflection sheet, performance criteria sheet, and then you complete the general green assessment sheet. So by the 14th of March, this is under the heading of explain how to mark the assessments and process. By 14th of March, trainees submit to their mentors directly first draft of the client letter of advice and the performance criteria sheet, brainstorming. Now, record somewhere who has submitted what and by when. In the pack I've included, and also I think in the email, a tracking sheet so you can mark off who's done what. You might want to use that, but certainly you're the ones who will be tracking who's done what. On the 15th of March, the day after it's due, 2 items we place on the problem solving online page to assist trainees with their second and final draft. There'll be the trainee general feedback sheet, just some general comments about their particular problem and the things that should have been in it. And then there'll be a blank trainee reflection, the reflection and review sheet. If a trainee submits work to you before the 14th of March and you want to give your feedback to them beforehand, before the 15th of March, you're welcome to do so, but the problem is that they don't have access to the general feedback sheet and the reflection sheet. So in all of that, so with your individual feedback, you will need to send them these 2 documents with the feedback and flag they shouldn't circulate the answers they've received. So if you look at them, I've included in some of the materials I've given you some sample emails or communication you can have with the trainee. There's a sample that deals with that. So it just simply says, here is your individual feedback, here is the general feedback, here is a reflection sheet, please submit it by the next due date. So how to correct. Now, firstly, with the performance criteria sheet they submit, this is quite easy. We really just want to see that they've made a bit of an effort, that they've done it. No need to give feedback on it, just make a note they've done it. If you look at the, there's a sample in the instructor guide, have a bit of a look, but it must be submitted to complete the topics. It identifies they've done all the different components. So performance criteria sheet is a bit of a ticker box exercise. How to correct. First draft of the letter of advice. Now this is similar to the other client letters that you do in other client files. They submit a first draft, you give feedback, they submit a second draft. From your end, first draft, the feedback is where you put more effort in my mind. Second draft, much less so. There are some sample letters, sample feedback on letters in the instructor guide. Gives you an idea of what we're looking for. And see the suggested approaches and points that could be raised in the instructor guide and also in the trainee feedback. And consider the style approach to language format that what you are looking for. Overall, follow your usual approach to giving feedback. how to correct the first draft. So individual feedback, now you can give it via the dialog box directly. Now I've included soft copy samples and an approach provided. You can just simply do a copy paste and do a bit of an adapt. There is a plus to this approach, and I'll flag that later on. You could also do your usual track changes, do comments in documents. Now, that's a little harder to use in the samples I've provided, but have a go with that if you like. The advantage of the first approach that I find, where you just give feedback via the dialog box or via email, is when you complete the green assessment sheets at the end. So there's a section where you, on the green assessment sheet, it says, what is your feedback on the first draft? Well, if you do it electronically, I just then do a copy and a paste of the feedback that I've given in the dialog box and place that into the green assessment sheet. Makes life a bit easier. Oh, I've done a little thing there. So what you send to your trainees initially is you send them individual feedback on the first draft, however you want to do that. Now, note that the trainee general feedback on letter is available online, or attach it. Note the reflection review sheet is available online, or attach it. Note the trainees are asked to read both individual and general feedback, reflect on this and in their second draft. Then submit by the 18th of April, which is the third intensive, their second and final draft of letter and a completed reflection sheet. Acknowledged performance criteria sheet, all is fine. Remind that they need to complete online quizzes if they haven't already. Now, there is a sample of that type of feedback you give to the trainee, or email or dialog box feedback. You'll find that in the kit I've given you, and also soft copy. So time frame on the feedback on the first draft. This is a bit up to each mentor, but as a guide, if a trainee submits letter on 14th of March, 2 weeks to provide feedback, so 28th of March. Second draft is due on the 18th of April, so to give them 2 to 3 weeks, I reckon you aim for the 28th of March for feedback. If trainees submit their work earlier, you can accelerate the process. When they submit the second draft, how to correct, similar to the performance criteria sheet, the review and reflection sheet, really we just want to see that they've had a go at it, have made a genuine attempt, no need to give feedback, but maybe acknowledge they've done it. It must be submitted to complete the topic. How to correct the second draft. Now, have a quick look really and ensure that it looks fine and addresses feedback provided last time. The key thing, they've got feedback from you, but also they've received pretty much the answers in the general feedback guide. So it really should tick all the boxes. It's more just making sure it looks okay. Feedback for most trainees is pretty much the same at this stage. And you'll see there are samples of that in the green assessment sheets, and I suggest you just use that. Post back general feedback text. So including general feedback on second draft. So in terms of when you send something back to the trainee, once they've sent you through the second and final draft, there's a sample in the materials again and soft copy, including general feedback on the second draft, acknowledging receipt of the reflection sheet and all is fine. Remind trainee to complete the online quizzes if they haven't, and they are signed off. And again, sample text in the green assessment sheets, and also sample communication in also the guide I provided. Time frame, kind of up to you. If it's due on the 18th of April, maybe a couple of weeks after that. Post correction of final draft of letter, you then need to complete the green assessment sheet for each trainee, just like a normal client file. Now I've given you some blank versions, hard copy, in a pack. You'll be advised by registry if trainee has completed the online quizzes. Hopefully by the 18th of April they will have. Assessment sheets ask that you confirm that they've completed 4 things: first and second drafts, performance criteria sheet, reflection and review sheet. The assessment sheet asks that you provide feedback on the first draft of their letter. So I would suggest that you simply use the feedback you did on the first draft, hopefully soft copy, and just place it in the text box. That's certainly what I've done in the past. The assessment sheet then asks you to provide feedback on the second draft of the letter. Now that's less detailed, and I personally have done a bit more of a generic approach with that, with most of the text for that to be the same for almost all the trainees, and you place it in the second text box. Again, there is sample of what to include in there in the materials I've given you. And towards the end, it says provide a brief assessment of the standard of work. Just write a brief comment. Again, I've just used a pretty generic approach in the past. And again, the above 3 things can be done by hand, or you can type it in soft copy using the soft copy forms I provided you. Your call. Or, as I said, my suggestion, use soft copy of assessment sheets provided. I've email them through. Pretty much most is already completed, just need to insert some of the details, and hopefully, so you just insert the trainee's details at the top, and ideally copy paste the individual feedback you'd already given on the first draft and just move it across. Or you have to type in a summary of the feedback. Feedback on the second draft, less detailed, generic, so it can be the same for most of the trainees. And again, brief assessment of standard of work and write a brief comment can be the same for most. Again, I'd suggest you use the sample grinder. Then what? Print out the green assessment sheet, 1 copy for office, 1 copy for registry, and you can maybe let the trainee know that they're all signed off. But that's it. I know it's a bit of a quick run through of problem solving, but you've got the due date coming up in a few weeks' time, and I imagine some of your trainees may have already sent some of the letters through to you, and so hopefully this gives you a bit of a heads up as to what to do. Please look at the hard copy pack that I've provided, just have a bit of a flick through that, and some of these online resources that are attached to the email that this link is to, you'll also find handy. I think this is one of those good problems where working smarter, not harder, is a good approach. So if you can do your feedback in electronic form, like you already do with the dialog box, that you can then repurpose the feedback you do and move it into the assessment sheet, so you don't have to double up. I think it makes life a bit easier. But you're more than welcome to do it hard copy by hand, and I've given you those hard copy sheets. If you do have any questions, please come see me, and good luck with the correction for it all. All right, cheers, bye.